You're here. Welcome to Spokane.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you. I feel very honored to be doing this Q&A with you at the festival.
Well, we're thrilled to be here with you. Spokane is a small city. We're not, New York, Chicago, LA, and to have a filmmaker like you come and spend some time with us after watching your film is a very big deal. So for everybody here with me, I'm here really only to get things started. If you have a question that you would like to ask Esther, please just raise your hand, stand up. Neil's going to run around with the microphone and let this be as interactive as possible. But Esther, thank you for making this film. This is the third time I've seen it, and there is a hopefulness to it that sometimes I don't know if we get to feel that hope, if we deserve to feel it, if we're there, if it means anything. But it's so important. It lifts me up very, very much. And something that the way I wanted to get into this conversation is to spend a minute talking about the film itself. Because often, for those of you who go to film festivals, like I do frequently, there is a way that documentary films, the Q&As go very quickly into the issue that the film is about. But fiction films, they get to talk about the art of the film, the structure, the pacing, the poetry. And in my mind, documentary films are works of art. And they're not journalism, they're not documents, but they really are a powerful story. And something that documentary filmmakers often talk about is, if you want to change the world, we've got to change the stories first. Because changing the stories connects us, bringing in powerful new narratives. Just like we saw in this film, it creates the conditions for the change to happen. And something that I think this film did really, really beautifully was make room for the voices of the people in the film to lead us through the story. There was no talking head narrator, no outside expert. The experts were the people in the film. And I was very, very moved by the words of Leonard Cohen. My mother was a big Leonard Cohen fan. And I wanted to bring those words in here just to get us started, because I have a question for Esther to get her going for you. In the film, we hear Leonard Cohen at the gathering of the bereaved families, and he says, "This is not about forgiving and forgetting. This is not about laying down one's arms in times of war. This is a response to human grief. A radical, unique, and holy, holy, holy response to human suffering." And so, Esther, I was so taken by how those words are at once about the world at large, but also very much about your film. And I was wondering, did you realize that as you were making the film? How did you come to this whole story? Give us a little introduction on how this whole thing happened.
Okay, thanks, Wendy. First of all, I want to make a little correction. Leonard Cohen made that dedication to the Israeli Palestinian bereaved families at his last concert in Tel Aviv in 2009. So it wasn't a specific gathering of that organization. It was a big public concert, but he dedicated his song Anthem to the organization, and he donated, I can't remember if it was 100% of the profits or 50% of the profits to that organization. He had a very strong connection to them. And I came across that footage, and I had to be in contact with Leonard Cohen's manager, Robert Corey, for permission to use it, and he was very generous about that. And truthfully, I feel that those words, this is about a response to human grief, a radical, unique, and holy, holy, holy response to human suffering. That is the heart message of the film. I really feel that encapsulates the film. And although this is a film about Israelis and Palestinians, I was very mindful when I was making it that I wanted it to be universal as well. So I think obviously that comment of Leonard Cohen's is a universal one. And the first time I went to the memorial ceremony in 2017, I was completely blown away by it. I was so moved. That's what pushed me to make the film. I really felt that people outside of Israel need to know this story. When I spoke to friends in Israel, I realized that many people within Israel and the Palestinian territories don't know the story as well. But I truly see them as a model for people dealing with their grief, with their trauma. As a psychologist, of people showing us a model of post-traumatic growth, and also as an amazing model of conflict resolution, working towards conflict resolution.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can I ask you, Esther, how did you make the choices in the film when you were building it as a single story? You have so many stories in there, right? And so many people who really opened their hearts and lives to you, which is incredible. So I want to talk about that. But also your use of text on screen, your use of showing kind of rooms without people in them and then with people in them. There is a way that you build in breathing moments into the film that really moved me and gave me a chance to kind of just think about what I just heard. But is this something, this is your first film. How did you, how did you come up with this structure for this film? And what were you really trying to do?
Right. And sorry, I hope there's not this noisy background noise. There's people in the garden next door, and I went to speak to them and I said, please, and they said they'll be done by now, but I can still hear a bit of noise.
We can't hear them.
Anyway, okay, so I'm a psychologist, a trauma psychologist in my day job, and I've been working I actually lived in Israel for 8 years. I did my master's in psychology at the Hebrew University. We had to return to Australia for family reasons. Over the last 12 years, I've been going and working as a psychologist in an honorary capacity a month a year in the pediatric department at Hadassah Hospital. And that was part of the background of making the film. But I say that because I think it's through my lens as a psychologist that I was following the journey of these people. And I felt that their quotes, their words from their experiences really signpost the story. So in the beginning, we have a quote from each of their terrible experiences of loss. And then we have quotes about how that trauma affects them, how it changes really their bodies and their minds and spirits, and how there's anger, and how that anger is so intense as well. And then how things begin to change, how this common experience of grief creates a sense of understanding. And we see that with Bushra, where she says, it's the same pain, it's the same wound. And we follow them through that understanding and how they become activists and how they really use their grief as a tool to try and create change. So I feel that their quotes signpost that journey in a clearer way. I feel that if we hadn't had those quotes on screen, the journey wouldn't have been signposted that clearly. I did at some point think about some kind of narration, like of a psychologist through the film, and decided not to do that. I felt their 4 stories were so powerful. I didn't need that, and that I chose to use their words. And then in terms of the breathing spaces, I have to tell you, in all honesty, I worked with 2 amazing editors, and they helped me with that. But I knew that the stories, the whole film is really pretty intense. There's a lot in there, and that there did need to be breathing spaces. And I really feel the nature in Israel and the Palestinian territories is so much a part of the place and is so beautiful that that's a perfect kind of cutaway for us for the breathing. And in a way that story of the olive trees, which is so important to both people, which is so symbolic for both people. Palestinians compare themselves to the olive tree, and their national poet Mahmoud Darwish has written about that, whilst in many ways the Israeli narrative is of an olive tree that's been uprooted and finally returned to its place. So we have these two stories about the olive tree, and then we know that the olive tree is a symbol of peace in a universal kind of sense, but ironically, in Israel and the Palestinian territories, it's actually a very contested symbol, and we know there's all those conflicts around olive trees and settlers destroying olive trees and all of that. So I felt the olive tree and the imagery of fields and desert were really important as well.
Thank you. So what's your hope with this film? It's like we know that a single film rarely brings by itself the kind of social change and social justice impact that it might want to have. And yet films figure prominently in just building towards that reality, because often the world changes before governments change, and we can model for those governments potentially as a people's what peace might look like. And these folks in your film and who are in the Middle East doing this work every day are doing that. How do you imagine your film could be part of that? And I wonder if there's anything that we can do here in Spokane that can help support that, your goals for the film. Just curious how you bring social justice into your thinking.
Right. And I mean, I think that the film was made with a very strong social justice goal from the beginning. I wanted this story to be told. I wanted people to see that you can go through the most terrible pain and both develop strengths, personal strengths afterwards. So, and use those strengths to reach out to the other. So on one level, I'd love the film to be used as a tool for psychologists and organizations working with people with trauma to give them a sense of hope. But I want the film to be used around conflict resolution, obviously specifically in Israel and the Palestinian territories, but beyond that as well. As I say, I think they're a really good model. So I've partnered with a range of organizations who are helping me with that. The Alliance for Middle East Peace, Kids for Peace. There's a wonderful Center for Moderate Islam and Reconciliation in East Jerusalem. It's Combatants for Peace, and Narrative 4, which Colin McCann heads up. I've been in touch with him around his book, A Paragon. So we've got those organizations on board. I've also specifically building a Building Bridges program to help leverage the film and developed educational resources so it can be used as a social change tool by Israeli and Palestinian community groups and adult university and high school education centers. So we're in the process of doing that. And if people did want to contribute to that, they can make a tax-deductible donation on the film's website. Because the other thing that Wendy knows when we had this Zoom was that this film was really made on a shoestring budget. So we do need to raise money for.
Of course. And I can absolutely see this film being used in schools for many, even, outside of Israeli Palestinian. It's a model for so much, kind of reconciliation work that has to go on in educational communities everywhere, in communities everywhere. So I think that, for folks who are not familiar with the kind of documentary landscape right now, there's a relatively new credit, a new kind of job listing within a film team called the impact producer. And so whereas you have lots of producers working on making the film happen, now you have producers that are working on bringing that film into the world. That's their job. And Esther's been doing it all on her own because that's what first films are like. And so and if you know of another organization that might want to show this film, people who are not, I mean, Spokane's small, but it's not this small, right? I mean, we do have 250,000 people out there, and there are so many opportunities for using this film, and for everyone we know outside of Spokane being able to do that. Please, Neil.
I think Woodworth-Peace Studies might be a good program to approach. Potentially also Gonzaga's own hate studies program.
That's right. I think there's lots of opportunities there. But I wanted to, because I can just talk forever, and Esther and I have already had like an hour-and-a-half conversation. If there's anything that you would like to ask her, based on your experience with the film, here comes a question. Oh, one and then two. You'll come next.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this film. I was very familiar with Combatants for Peace and the Parent Circle, but this film was incredible. And it broke my heart when I read Haaretz a few days ago to find out that this particular organization is now a potential target of the new Israeli government in terms of pulling the dialogue circles from high schools. So,
Yes.
My family lives in Tel Aviv, and those are some of the high schools that some of the folks we saw on the screen used to go into and speak, and that there's a new qualification for outside organizations that want to do programs in public schools. They cannot in any way degrade or defame the IDF. And I know that the Parent Circle has already put out the alert that they are clearly a target of that. So I was curious if you heard from the organizers, from the folks that you featured in your film, about how they're reacting to this and what the plan is. And I'll just put in a plug that both Combatants for Peace and the Parent Circle both have American affiliates that you've been doing it too.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Esther.
Thank you for that question. I can't hear it 100% clearly, but I basically got the gist of it. Yes, I was going to say almost at the beginning of this Zoom that when you were saying, Wendy, the film is hopeful, and it was made with the hope and to give hope. That's very true. But I also feel very sad about what's happening in Israel at the moment, really sad. Just the last few days have shown us so much more loss of life and conflict, and we're not going in a good direction at the moment. And we really hope that this current situation is going to implode and change. But I'm very aware of that article in Haaretz that said that the organisation is a target of the Education Ministry. I've read articles that have come back and said that the organisation doesn't in any way degrade or humiliate the IDF. I actually I'm not a social media person at all, which is probably not good for a filmmaker, but I just don't know about that world. And but I did, an Israeli friend sent me that post, and then I did post that as a filmmaker who knows that organisation well. I've never seen anything that they do that degrades or humiliates the IDF in any way. In fact, they're very committed to sanctity of life and, breaking down stereotypes and creating peace. So I can't see how that criteria can truthfully be used to undermine their work or to prevent them going into schools, but I can imagine that the current government will try and do that. I think the current government are going to make their work very difficult. I guess another thing, I was so upset or felt so strongly when the elections happened and the government was forming, that I felt that I had to speak to the 4 participants in the film, and I did a Zoom chat with each of them, which we filmed, I recorded, and I've now created a short clip about their reactions to the government and how they feel that will impact their work, which is on the film's website. So I think it is really worrying, and I hope that their work won't be too badly impacted, but I'm concerned that it will.
Yeah, I get worried for people's safety as well. And it's an extraordinary act of courage for them to step forward into that conversation, given everything that's going on. So we'll be keeping them in our thoughts for sure. Neil, there's a question down here.
Thank you. I'm wondering if the film has been shown in the Palestinian occupied territories, and it's maybe a related question. The Irish question for a long time, great numbers of violence in Ireland. There's a peace process there that took place. Are there any echoes of these two such different histories, different situations that for you as a documentary maker, you have to approach these two things, these two challenges to peace are so quite different. We're in Colombia, which has had terrible years of civil war and has gained some level of peace. It seems to me the story this film tells is very encouraging, and how to get folks to watch it as a moment of conversion toward peace.
Mm-hmm.
And in these situations, in different parts of Palestine, Israel is so different that it would not be received, even if a government wasn't a terrorist organization. It's not putting themselves in.
Yeah. Thank you.
To ask not a political question, but your production is of great worth, but how to get it received.
Mm. Thanks. Did you?
I guess I got most of it.
Okay.
I think the first part of the question was, has the film been shown in the Palestinian territories? Okay. So the film was shown in Tel Aviv in early December, and the organization was bussing in people from the Palestinian territories, members of the organization and others, and there was a panel with the 4 participants and actually an Israeli Arab journalist moderating that panel. Now, in the end, what happened, and it was really upsetting, was that Bushra didn't get a permit to come in, and a whole lot of the Palestinians didn't get a permit to come in. So although there were Palestinians in the room at the screening, there weren't the number that was supposed to be there. I mean, there was a number of articles have been written in the Israeli media, and the one in the Jerusalem Post kind of starts off saying, you know, I was at the screening and you could hear Hebrew and Arabic through the air. So there definitely was that presence, but it wasn't as much as it was supposed to be. At this point, that's the only time the film screened in Israel. We are wanting, I've got a great distributor in Canada, and the aim is to approach the Israeli television broadcasters and offer them to screen the film. I've got friends in the Israeli film business, a director, and they say, oh, it should be on TV, Erev Yom HaZikaron, which would be amazing. But again, I don't know how that's going to go in the current national climate. But that's the aim. That would be amazing. And there are kind of alternative TV stations, the Democracy TV station and Station 11. So we might see if we
and underground community screenings. I can help set you up with folks who can.
Yeah.
That's, it's like if the institutions aren't helping you, we go around those institutions and we can show that all across the territories.
Yes. Now, the other part of the question about Northern Ireland and all of that, I thank you for that question, because that's actually a really important thing about the film, this whole idea of what's called transitional justice, which is that approach that was used in Northern Ireland and South Africa, which has grown out of the fields of human rights and conflict resolution. So I learned all about that making the film. In fact, in terms of the structure of the film, if there was going to have been another layer in it, it would have been that layer of transitional justice, because I interviewed Professor Mohammed Dajani, who runs this Wasatiyah Institute for Moderate Islam in East Jerusalem, who's talking about transitional justice from a Palestinian perspective, and Dr. Jeremy Bracker, who's a human rights lawyer who was working at the Minerva Center for Human Rights at the Hebrew University, who's talking about it from the Israeli perspective. In fact, he's just published a book called Applying Transitional Justice to the Israeli-Palestinian Conflict. And, it's using concepts like, in South Africa and Northern Ireland, there were these kind of truth and reconciliation commissions. So he actually suggests a model for an Israeli-Palestinian Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I think that's a really important direction of work. It's a direction that talks about developing peace on a grassroots level, that you can't just have a top-down approach to peace like was tried at Oslo, which failed because the communities on the ground, both on the Israeli and the Palestinian sides, weren't ready for it. You need to have this bottom-up grassroots approach, which is changing the culture of conflict on the ground, which is changing stereotypes. And we can see how intensely that is needed at the moment. If they can't even let bereaved Palestinian people come who are trying to build peace come in and speak to schools, I think that just speaks to how much that grassroots change of conflict is needed. And I did mention to Wendy that, and it's amazing because there was a comparison made of the number of dollars spent on this kind of grassroots work in Northern Ireland, and it was something like about $50 per person compared to in Israel and the Palestinian territories, which is like about $6 or $8 per person. And so to remedy that, there's been a new fund, the NITI Lawi Middle East Partnership for Peace Act in the States, which has authorized $250 million of funding over 5 years for grassroots people-to-people peace building. So that's really just come into effect over the last year. So I do think that's a really important approach. How that will work with the current government is hard to know.
Well, that's right. And the current government needs to get with this idea of radical, unique, and holy responses to human suffering. If they could do that, we'd be on a better track. But there's so much, there's so much else that's, other perspectives that will keep peace from happening. We just have to hope this film can help keep that conversation going. And as we're talking, I'm thinking of so many organizations that we could outreach to in order to just let them know this film exists, and they can come up with their own activities around that film. Because beyond screenings, conversations like this are very important because you never know who's in the audience. You don't know where they're going to get up and take it. And the idea that more audiences of Arabs and Palestinians could come together, but it's also Black and white, it's immigrants and locals. There's so many ways for these kinds of conversations to blossom. So I know we've been sitting in here for quite a while. I want to honor that and honor Esther's time as well. Anyone have a final? Okay, we're good. Esther?
Wendy, can I just say one little thing? I was just saying that if anybody did want to reach out to me directly, I would love to hear from you. I think you can contact me from the website, the film's website. Yeah, I think otherwise you can. My email address is esthertakac@gmail.com. If you have any ideas, if you just want to say anything, I'd love to hear.
Good. Thank you so much. And Neil, and I think a collective thank you to the Spokane Jewish Film Festival who made this all happen. And to all of you for coming out in the freezing cold. Neil, thank you. And thank you to all the staff. This really was quite a wonderful program, and I've been honored to be involved. So see y'all soon. Esther, thank you so much. Gorgeous work. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.